Professor Wisse, in an age of science, in an age of novelty, why should we study tradition?
Well, tradition wasn't always tradition. Tradition was novelty in its time, too, we should remember. But I think that that is what we call civilization. Civilization is the accumulation of everything that has been best known, best thought through, best lived in life. And that becomes the best of tradition. So to study tradition, you just don't study everything that's out there. What you study is what has been culled for you by people who have thoughtfully gone through texts, gone through experiences, gone through everything that there is to know, and decided that these are the things which are most worthwhile. And they decided not for the past, they decided for themselves. So when we put together a course now on tradition, we're not thinking of what was greatest for the people of their time. We're thinking of what in that tradition is most critical for us. And I would say more than critical. What is it in that tradition that we cannot live without?
And as you see it, is there a uniquely Jewish contribution, or is there a unique contribution that Jewish literature makes to our understanding of tradition?
Oh, of course, I think so. Every literature considers itself unique, and there are great literatures in this world. But Jewish literature is a literature of the Jewish people. And to the extent that the Jewish people have lived at the center of history for many centuries, and at no time more than in the past 2 centuries, I would say that the literature that grows out of Jewish experience reflects some of the most dramatic, some of the most extraordinary, and some of the most horrific experiences of our time. And I think that reading Jewish literature, you know not only what goes right, in other words, what the Jewish people has wrought, some of which is amazing and I think should be better known than it is, but you also learn from this literature what has gone wrong, and that's sometimes even more important.
Thinking about what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what is at stake if Jews today don't have a better understanding of their literature, their past, and the traditions that it expresses?
Well, I've sometimes compared this to a lobotomy. And that's because I teach particularly Yiddish literature. Now, Yiddish literature was the literature of more people than have ever spoken a Jewish language at any time in history. There were some 10 million people before the Second World War who functioned in Yiddish, and there were hundreds of writers, and there was newspapers, magazines. It was a very, very rich culture. And so much was registered in that culture, including the whole process of modernity, the whole process of how tradition really had to confront everything new that came at it. It's all there. And then this literature is inaccessible. And here's a people that considers itself supremely literate. It goes by the title People of the Book, and many people take that to mean not just the Bible, to which it originally referred, but the people of the book, as if one is a literate people, and of course literacy was much emphasized by the Jews. And here's a people that knows nothing, almost nothing, about its own evolution in this very important period of its life. It's really quite extraordinary. So I would say that there's a tremendous ignorance, and that makes one repeat mistakes, that makes one ignorant of one's own process. How has one been shaped? So I think studying what we intend to study is of tremendous importance for our self-knowledge. One of the texts that I always want to go back to, and go back to with great delight, is perhaps the best known text of Shalom Aleicham's, which is Tevye the Dairyman. That is the basis of Fiddler on the Roof. But Fiddler on the Roof is a musical that was based on these stories. The stories themselves are amazing. And what you have is this person, Tevye, who is, I suppose, in some sense, a traditional Jew. But he's a traditional Jew with a very liberal impulse, with a very liberal personality. He wants to stretch as much as he possibly can to accommodate his daughters, whom he loves. And each of these daughters confronts him with a real problem and challenge. Firstly, they want to marry for love. If you marry for love, you break the community. In other words, each person marries whom he or she wants to marry. We take this for granted. But if you do not take into account what your community requires of you, namely that you marry somebody within your community or bring that person into the community, there is no community. So Sholem Aleichem takes his character at the very point at which tradition confronts its most meaningful challenge. And from Sholem Aleichem's point of view, it's interesting. There are so many challenges: communism, materialism, so forth, many challenges. But the most serious challenge of all is romantic love.